Now, the cookbook was designed, and I want to kind of clarify this. It was designed to give you, in phase one, everything about CBO so that you're armed with understanding CBO, but it's not just campaign budget optimization and setting your budgets at the top level. It's really explaining how the new algorithm works, because that's what it is. It's not just, we've shifted budgets to campaign level and, you can manage your budgets in different way. There's so much more to it. And I really encourage everyone to read it. If you don't understand it, that's fine. You will start to understand it as you start to use CBO more. And then the second part of the cookbook is everything we've learned over the last 12 months and kind of distilled into the most simplest way we could make it for you guys to go and use essentially what's worked for us. So, I explained to someone recently, there's 3 tiers of CBO. There's the first tier, which is, Facebook saying, this is how CBO works. This is our best practice. And anyone that's worked with Facebook, you kind of take Facebook's best practice with a pinch of salt, see if it works for you. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Then the second part is how we use it, how we specifically use CBO and our strategies. And I put in our kind of multi-funnel strategies and different kind of ways, big budgets, small budgets, etc., to give you a range of how we do things with CBO. And then really what I wanted you to do is take those recipes and figure out how you can adapt them and make them work for you. So this is the thing about, why did I use the cookbook approach? Not just because I wanted to be a chef, but it was as I was kind of writing these step-by-step steps of kind of how to achieve the same success. What occurred to me is in any recipe, the ingredients are kind of one of the most essential things. So I wanted to make sure that was split up. So what kind of goes into each recipe. But the recipe itself can be adapted. So yes, you can add your own ingredients, but the recipe can be adapted. And what I want you to do is take those recipes, test to see what works for you, but then adapt it, tweak it, and play it. Because when it comes to CBO, when it comes to any strategy with Facebook, there is no one size fits all. So I know people want silver bullets, and people are selling their 8-figure funnels, their 7-figure ad account structures. The fact is your ad account and your performance will be different because your business, your products, your funnels, your expertise, there's just so many variables involved. So that's why I've broken it down into recipes with the hope that you'll use them and adapt them and make them work for you as well. And then this session is to fill in as many of those gaps as possible. What we will be doing is taking all of the questions from here, obviously putting into the video for you guys to watch back later, but we're going to also put it into a second edition of the cookbook, which you guys are going to get as a free upgrade. And what I want to make sure is it covers off as much as you guys need now and right through CBO going live and beyond as well. I spent a considerable time putting this document together with my team, with students, with non-students, really trying to piling as much as possible. So that's all there to give you the best chance of success with CBO, especially right now with many exciting things coming up for, especially in e-commerce, to give you a huge head start as well. The first question from Ali Arshad, typically, when do creatives fatigue? Is there a metric we can track, i.e. frequency, or data-backed estimates that we can use to predict when fatigue may happen? Now, let me share with you an interesting story. So back in 2015, I was scaling aggressively. Now, when I say aggressively, I haven't scaled like this before and since 2015. We were scaling to 6-figure spends a day. Now, this is back in 2015. And for us, it was a huge, huge milestone, e-commerce store, print and demand. At peak, we were spending $200,000 a day. I just try and get your head around that. Some people struggle to spend that monthly. Some people struggle to spend that yearly. Now, what I can tell you is, as cool as it might sound to some people, it's extremely, extremely stressful because any swing in performance. So if you imagine you're spending $1,000 a day and, last few days, Facebook decides to go a bit funny and, conversion rates drop, your CPMs increase, you can kind of lose $10, $100, maybe even $1,000 here and there. But at those kind of scales, you're talking about losing $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 with the swings that Facebook made. So, when I talk about creative fatigue, I've worked all the way through from spending kind of small amounts and building up fatigue to spending huge amounts and building up that fatigue even quicker. So actually at that time, back in 2015, there weren't many tools available. So we built our own. We built our own on top of the ads API. And what the metrics we were looking, and we were trending graphs exactly to do this, because we wanted to predict the creative fatigue before it happened, right? So there are a few signals that we're looking at. Number one is audience saturation. So back in 2015, that metric did not exist in Facebook. Right now you have that. So if you load up the delivery column in your ads manager, and as long as your ad set has enough impressions, then when you look at your ad set and you hover over the cell for delivery, you should get a link to click into Delivery Insights. Delivery Insights will tell you, based on that specific ad set, how saturated are your ads. So there's a metric called first time impression ratio. That tells you as an advertiser how many people have seen the ad for the first time. Now, if 100% of people or thereabouts have seen it for the first time, then it's all good. You're quite clean. If you're hovering about 20% and below, then you have a problem, which means 80% have already seen the ad at least once. So therefore, what do? You replace the ad because the frequency has picked up too much. Now, one of the kind of misunderstandings is when you have an audience and you have an audience of 1 million or 10 million or 20 million, that creative fatigue surely can't kick in because I'm only spending 1,000 a day. The problem is Facebook doesn't see it like that. So let's say you've got 10 million audience, Facebook will find the best users, then it will start to expand out. So it doesn't just dive in and say, here's 10 million people, let's start serving the ads to everyone. It's a really clever system, but it does trip people up as well. So the first thing I'm looking at is what my saturation is like. Frequency is something I keep an eye on. Now, if you imagine top of funnel, generally your frequencies are fairly low. As you go further down your funnels, your frequency picks up. However, from my testing, I found, like especially lower funnel, frequency is not necessarily a bad thing. I've had retargeting campaigns with frequencies of 12, 13, 14 over a 3-4 day period, and they're absolutely crushing it. The ROAS is doing great, CPA is doing great, and it's just consistently performing. However, if you are seeing those kind of frequencies top of funnel, then you're going to be in trouble. Because the thing is, when you get down the funnel, people do need those reminders. That's why a lot of kind of retargeting ads keep on trying and eventually get you to buy. They can work. So, frequency I do keep an eye on, but that's not my metric of kind of creative fatigue, on its own. The other thing I'm looking at, and going back to kind of what we were trending, so we'd keep an eye on frequency. We'd also look at the click-through rate and the cost per thousand. Now, the reason for that is when you start to see a decline, so let's say you've had a steady click-through rate, whatever it is, let's round it to 1%, and you see that 1% starting to tail off. If CPM's going the opposite direction at the same time, that's a hint at creative fatigue, because that means that the ad is no longer serving its purpose. The click-through rate's dropping because the audience is just not responding. Your CPM starts to creep up because the performance isn't there. So here's the thing. If you've got good click-through rate, good conversion rate, high loading page times, your CPM actually drops because Facebook will favor you for giving the user a great experience. So that's just something to bear in mind. So I'm looking at click-through rate and CPM, but I'm trending that over time. Then the other thing, the obvious metric is CPA, ROAS, whatever your kind of key metric is, top of funnel. If you're obviously seeing that start to decline, maybe that's creative fatigue, and that's something to look at. But generally, what I prefer to do is look at audience saturation, see how that's doing. Generally, how's my performance going? Am I seeing any fluctuations in either CPC, CTR, or CPM? And just trying to figure out when the right time is to swap that creative out. Sometimes it's more drastic. Like, in fact, we had an example today. One of our ad sets has had a really successful ad, 7 days, 14 days, 30 days. The trend has been really, really good. But in the last 2 days, the performance has dropped. The performance on cost per acquisition and ROAS in particular. We tried to duplicate it. It didn't work. We tried to pause it yesterday and restart it today. It didn't work. That for us is a massive, massive signal that we've kind of pushed that ad as far as we can. Now, the cool thing about the way we process our ads is we always have ads ready. So the graduation testing process, where we're always queuing up new ads, means that when creative fatigue does happen, then we've got plan B, C, D, all the way to Z in place already. So that's just something to kind of give you some insight into kind of how we manage creative fatigue as well. So next up on the list with 13 thumbs up, Aliyah shared again, once you've started your CBO scaling campaigns, after letting them run for a while, 3 days min, do you ever turn off underperforming ad sets? The short answer is yes. Because the thing is, the performance of the CBO doesn't really know what your metrics are as a marketer unless you start using manual bid. Because manual bid is your way of saying, this is my max bid, this is my target bid, this is what's an acceptable CPA, for example. When you run on auto, Facebook's just looking for the lowest CPA, lowest CPR, or whatever your metric is, or highest ROAS. But it doesn't really have context to that kind of effect as well. So we actually paused 2 ad sets in a CBO. So this particular CBO we were running recently, it had 4 broad audiences in it. Those broad audiences were female and split by age. So it was something like 25 to 34, 35, 44, 45, 54, and 55 plus. So 4 age brackets, different ads running in each based on those personas. And we had a single CBO budget in place, something like 1,600, 1,700 a day. It's been performing consistently well for the last 5 or 6 weeks. Over the last probably 2 days in particular, and also since the weekend when Facebook randomly decided to disapprove some ads that have been working fine for many, many weeks. This happens to everyone. Since then, the performance has just dropped. And so what we've decided to do is, although we have rules in place to cut bad ads based on bad performance, we're also taking an earlier decision manually to pause bad ad sets as well. So here's the thing. If you had all the money in the world, then you just let CBO run and do its thing. And CBO eventually would do its thing. But in reality, most of us don't want to waste our money. Doesn't matter how rich you are, you don't want to waste your money. So what I do is, if I feel like this performance is not going to recover, or it's really obviously looking bad, then I will pause it out. So here's an example. In this particular funnel, we could see that cost per click, cost per outbound click, cost per landing page view, content view, add to cart, checkout, etc. All of those metrics across the ad set and all the ads were way off. They were way off target, like probably double what they should have been. If all the ads in your single ad set are off, it's probably the ad set that's the problem, especially if you have good performance. So in that case, we just pause the ad set. What I might have done if I really wanted to chase the sale is just duplicate that ad set with the same ads and run it again. But in this situation, because of some of the problems that have been happening with Facebook over the last 2 days, we decided to just pause the ad set and come back the next day and restart it. See, the thing is, it depends what you really want from your business right now. So if you're in Q4, it's Black Friday, you really got like 2-3 days to really maximize sales, then I would be a lot more aggressive. But right now with this particular brand, we don't need to be so aggressive. So we'll pause, we'll come back tomorrow. Like, there's no point stressing over this. Sometimes Facebook goes wrong. Sometimes it's just unpredictable. I've spent multiple millions, and I've spent, I can't even tell you how many hours I spent on the platform. But even sometimes I have to admit defeat and say, Facebook won. I'll pause the ad set. I'll come back tomorrow, and I'll sleep safely. I'll sleep happily, and I'll come back and try again. But the worst thing is that you just keep chasing that revenue, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the evening, you're stressing out. Sometimes you just need to know when to let go as well. So that's just my recommendation on CBO pausing for the ad sets. So generally, I prefer not to pause the ad sets. There are occasions where I will pull it back. Vitali, so I was told by my rep that duplicating ads in the same ad set will cause bad performance, lower delivery, and overall it's not good for the algorithm. So your rep, in fact, any rep will tell you a lot of things are not good for the algorithm, not good for the platform, not good for Facebook. With anything that I tell you, a rep tells you, you read on forums, you read in any kind of blog or whatever it is, test it. I cannot stress how important it is to test it, because you might see something from me where I say, this didn't work for us. It does not mean that it categorically won't work for anyone in the world. Bear in mind, there's 7 million advertisers out there. There are millions of different business models, accounts, account structures, etc. So in this case, so your rep told you that duplicating ads in the same ad set will cause bad performance. Test it. We've done that. So for example, often, and you'll see it in the cookbook, we duplicate ad sets in a single CBO. That's against Facebook's best practice. We also duplicate ads using the same ad with shared post IDs in a single ad set. That is also against Facebook's recommendation, but it works. Now, if I tested this, which we tested many, many years ago, and we continue to test it, if it stopped working, then we'd stop using it. But at the moment, it works. Here's an example. So PPE, up until probably early last year, PPE was our go-to test strategy. It still works in some countries and in some kind of verticals, especially for lead gen, but for e-commerce, it's working less and less. So we've shifted and moved on. That's just the fact of life. If it works, great, we'll use it. If it doesn't, we'll move on. You can't attach yourself to any kind of strategy or methodology. At the same time, test things out, see what would work. Now, in terms of kind of low delivery and not being good for the algorithm, the fact is, whether the ad is duplicated or not, how does Facebook really, really know? Like, does it look at the ad and say, this is exactly the same, so I'm going to shift this one out and only focus on this one? From what I've seen, it doesn't. It just sees them as independent ads, throws them into the auction and sees what works. And when I push an ad into the auction, I don't want to take a chance that it might work. So that's why I spread my risk. I'm going to throw multiple ads into that auction. Even if they're exactly the same, chances are they will give you a different performance. And that's why we do it. And then we pulls out the bad ads, let the good ones continue. So I would just say, question your rep in particular and kind of decide what works for you. Marco, when you have to test new creatives, add one ad set with new creative split 3 times, or do you duplicate an ad set, duplicate an existing ads and add the new creative in prospecting? So when we want to test new creatives, so here's the process. So when you have nothing, let's say you're just starting off a new account, or you burnt out all your audiences, then your first goal is to find audiences, because ads do not exist without audiences, right? So the first thing is I want to find audiences that work, and in the same manner, the ad set needs an ad. So the first thing is I want to use 3 of the same ads in as many audiences as possible and find the match. Find 1 or more ads that work with 1 or more ad sets. Then when I found that these ad sets can work, then I move them into prospecting and start to see if I can spend more money, get stability, get profitability, and then look to scale out. So that's our kind of three-step process. Find an audience, start prospecting, and then if prospecting is successful, then start scaling. Then if we want to test more creatives, we'll take our winning ad sets and put those into test mode and start cycling through lots of different creatives. So we've already fixed our ad set. So we know, for example, women 25 that are into a particular brand. This one ad works for us because it's doing well on scaling. Let's now start trying different creatives. Let's start seeing what else is going to work for this audience. And that's kind of how we then do our creative testing. So firstly, we want to find fixed audiences, move those into prospecting and scaling. Then when we found audiences that work, we fix them into testing. So that one variable is fixed. We know this audience works. Then we keep cycling creative. So that within that creative, it could be static images versus video versus slideshow and all the different formats. And then we want to see what kind of variants work there as well. So we would take the one ad set, we'd take the creative and we'd duplicate the creative and give it a chance to see if it would work. Then we start to use different creatives. Now, in terms of existing ads and existing ad sets, once we have an ad set that's working and we've identified an audience, and we'll keep reusing that ad set as well, and just keep continuing to test different ads out as well. So hopefully that answers your question. Revanth, my question is when to cut the bad ones. Do you pause at ad level or campaign level? So one thing I've tried to really, really clearly stress in the CBO guide is I pause at the ad level first. And this is also to do with how you understand how CBO works and how you structure it. I try and make sure that I don't have too many ad sets in a CBO, and equally, I don't have too many ads in my ad set as well. So when performance is going, when that spend is going on, I'm pausing bad ads out first. So that's why I try to limit the number of ads running. Because here's the thing, let's say your CPA target is $30. And if an ad spends, let's say $60 without a sale, then you pulls it out. If you've got 5 ads running, you could end up doing $60 times 5, so $300. before you realize that that ad set isn't working. So we try and limit the number of ads running. We work with a whole range of budgets, and I've tried to make this in this kind of guide in a way that works for every kind of budget. Now, if you're already spending $10,000 a day and your test budget is let's say $500, $1,000, generally I prefer to leave 5 to 10% for testing. Then you might say, I'm prepared to make a bit more of a loss, and I'm prepared to speculate a lot more in exchange for learnings. But most people don't want to kind of waste too much money on their testing. So the kind of question on when to cut the bad ones, firstly, I'm looking at my CPA ROAS target. So for example, if I'm setting up rules, then I'm looking at, if for example, we've spent 3 times the CPA target with no purchase, depending on the kind of time required to buy and also the type of funnel, then we might pause it. We also look at early metrics. So for example, we'll know for our prospecting what a good cost per add to cart is, what's a good cost per initiate checkout, and then we'll add like a 25, maybe 30% swing on that. So if we know that, for example, a good cost per add to cart is $10, we might kind of give our leeway 13, 14, maybe even $15. If it's below $15, we'll let it continue running. If it goes above $15 cost per add to cart, then we might kill it, because we know generally it's a lot higher than it should be. So we're doing that decision making at the ad level, but equally, if we see any ad sets going rogue, then we'll pause those out as well. So, to give you an example, I saw a question, I don't know if it's here, asking about, the typical CBO structure needs a big budget. So, if your CPA target is $50, then our general recommendation is per ad set, then your budget needs to be $150 per ad set, so $50 times 3. And then, you add that for as many ad sets you've got. So if you've got 5 ad sets, $150 each, then you've got $750 budget for your CBO. And a lot of people are saying, well, that's a lot. But it's not a lot when you set your $750 budget. And if you look at your ad performance during the day, you can set rules, you can do it manually, and you can see that, an ad set has spent 3 to 4 times the CPA, an ad set, without generating a sale. And you know that by that point, $200 spent, you should have at least one sale. Then you can pause the ad set. But I prefer to work at the ad level. And I'm also looking at the early metrics as well. So I'm not just waiting for CPA and ROAS. Here's another thing. When the ad gets dropped into the auction, if it starts off badly, there's a high chance it won't recover. So if it's already spent $50, $100, $150 and your cost per add to cart, initiate checkout, CPA is way off the scale, chances are it won't recover. So you can kill that early. You can maybe duplicate it, give it another chance, or you can leave it off until the next day and let it start, and then kind of let it cycle through and get more data as well. So hopefully that answers your question. Do you pause at ad level or campaign level? Very rarely will I pause at campaign level. I'll start at the ad level, then I'll end up pausing ad sets that I want, and the campaign just is switched on. By that point, there may be no ads switched on or no ad sets, in which case it stops spending. And then I'll come back the next day and decide what to do. If I'm going to restart things, generally I do 3 restarts. So if I take the kind of 0 to 3 day window, I'll run the ads. If any ads or ad sets don't perform, I pause them out and then restart them the next day, pause them out, restart them the next day. If by the 3rd time it's still not performing, then I give up on it and we move on. But my goal is to minimize my losses. So even if my budget is $2,000 for the CBO, $3,000, $500, whatever it is, I don't want people to think you have to spend $3,000 a day to maximize your learnings and give CBO a chance. You do need to trim it. You do need to cut it, save your money, trim the fat, give it a chance with the data. If it doesn't give you what you need, then you can restart it. If, however, you've got the budgets and you don't mind making the losses, then chances are Facebook will start to make it work, because with a CBO, it needs time to speculate all the variations of your ad set, your ad, the placements, the genders, the ages, the locations, everything needs to go into the mixer. And Facebook's testing heavily in the first 3 days. Then eventually it starts to stabilize, and that's when you get better performance as well. Cool, so on to the next question. Mikhail, do we kill the graduating testing phase 1 campaigns after finding a good chunk of winning audience and continue with testing ads in phase 2? That's generally my approach. Now, here's an interesting question. So some people have said, why do you kill the campaigns in phase one? What I wanted to do was illustrate the phased process and kind of give it to you guys in a simple way, where phase one is let's find winning audiences and obviously ads that work for them. And then we go into phase two where we fix our campaigns and we're kind of just focusing on creative testing. You can leave your ad sets running from phase one. You don't have to absolutely shift over to a brand new ad set. So let's say, for example, phase one, you found that men 45 plus that are interested in BMW, they are your prime market, and you found one or two creatives that work. Then you can leave that ad set running in your phase one ad set and just keep cycling in new creatives. Throw them in, see if they work. If they don't, you move on. So you can leave that campaign, that ad set running from phase one. But the concept is you're now switching that ad set into phase two. So the reason I put that in the document was because I wanted people to switch their mindset that this campaign is now a phase two campaign. So if you want to keep that running from phase one, absolutely do so. There's nothing stopping you. And that's something which I will update in the guide to make it a lot more clearer for everyone to understand that the way I see phases is not necessarily exactly the step-by-step. You can kind of have variations between that as well. Ethan, do you recommend dynamic creative in the testing phase to speed up the process of finding images, video, copy, combinations that work? Do I recommend it? Personally, no. The reason is I just don't think that the Facebook's reporting and also the control is as good as it needs to be. Now, if and when they allow you to pause specific variations, then I'm going to be all for testing with dynamic creative. But at the moment, it doesn't work with our testing methodology, which is we give creatives a certain number of impressions, and if they don't give us good metrics, then we pause them out. With dynamic creative optimization, you don't have control over that any of those variants. So for those that don't know, you create one ad, you put your variants of your copy, your images, call to action, etc. You have one ad running, but Facebook serves different permutations. So video ad one with creative one, video ad two with creative one, video ad one with creative two, etc. So all those variants get served up. When you break down your report, Facebook will say, you know, this video had this performance, this creative had that, but it's really hard to A, make sense of the data, but B, I can't make it work with our process where we take an ad, we give it a certain number of impressions, because statistically, after that, we know that it's kind of set, and we'll look at early metrics like cost per add to cart, cost per initiate checkout, or if it's a short funnel like a lead or registration form, then we look at the cost per lead, cost per reg. And then we make a call to pause it. And we have a whole automation system built around this using rules and using our kind of process as part of kind of graduation testing. So that's why I don't use dynamic creative, because it's just limiting us in our processes and our ability to test so many things fast. Can it work? Absolutely. If you're happy to just let Facebook run that one ad and push budget into all those permutations with no control as to kind of what you pulls out and kind of what you pull out and stuff like that, then yeah, it can work. And you can put money behind it, find particular variations that work. But what I would do is, once you find a variation that works, pull it out into a separate ad, run it to 2,000-3,000 impressions, and see if it does continue to give you the good performance as well. And then obviously you can move it into prospecting and scaling from that as well. Isaac, if I am testing several ads, about 8, there is a time when phase 2 and the prospecting phase use the same ad sets. Can this be harmful? The reason for me it's not harmful is because we're doing very small scale testing. So when we're running, let's say we've got, we take our male 45 plus BMW interest audience. If we're running that in testing and we're running that in scaling, let's say, we're spending $500 a day. We're doing, let's say, $50 CPMs, just to keep the numbers simple. So $50 CPM means it's $50 to reach 1,000 people. So $500 spent means that we can reach 10,000 people. So every day that prospecting campaign is reaching 10,000 people. With our testing, we limit it to 2,000 impressions per ad. And that's spread out. It's not even generally in a day as well. Then as you start to spend more and more and more in your prospecting and your scaling, the reach is far bigger in your prospecting and scaling than in your testing. Like your testing, you're just taking a slight nibble at the audience to see if the audience and the ad is going to work. So because of that, I don't see any clash. We're just doing small spends in our testing. And that's why also I don't like direct creative, is because we can do all those small testing, pause an ad once we've got statistical data, and then move on. So for us, there isn't a huge amount of overlap, especially at the bigger spends. If you're only spending a couple of $100s a day in your cold, your prospecting, your potential scaling, and you're doing a couple of $100 a day in your testing, then there will be a clash. So I think the more the separation there is between your test budget and your kind of main budget, then the less and less and less competition. It also depends on audience size. It also depends on the pixel optimization you're using. And this is also why in graduation testing and the account calibration, for anyone that doesn't know, account calibration, what we do is we run a broad audience, we choose our best ads, and we run an ad set for each of the pixel events. And we want to find the ad set that gives us a good CPM, but also gives us good down funnel metrics. I'm talking about good cost per active cart, initiate checkout, and purchase rate. And so a lot of our testing doesn't actually go on the purchase pixel event. A lot of our testing actually ends up being initiate checkout or add to cart, depends on the average order value. So again, because of that, there isn't much crossover, because when we're prospecting, scaling, we're going after the purchase pixel, we're going after this kind of portion of the audience here, whereas our testing, which is testing against add to cart and stuff, is up here. There's barely any crossover. So that's the other thing to bear in mind. And that's kind of why the graduation testing framework works so well. We use the discount bidding to take advantage of cheap, high quality traffic. We test different pixels to ensure there's minimized overlap, and many other things in between that as well. So that's just kind of a bit of an insight as to kind of why and how that works as well. Freeman A, as you have mentioned that it takes 50 per ad set per week for stability, it is quite challenging for conversion purchase campaigns to hit. What is your advice? So here's the thing, 50 is Facebook's recommendation, not mine. I have made it work with less. So we had a CBO recently, it was doing about $500 a day. We were doing about 21 purchases a week, and it was stable. So like 50 is Facebook's benchmark to say, if you want stable delivery and you want to scale up, then you should be aiming for 50 a week. But in reality, not everyone can do that, right? So first of all, I would say personally from my own ad accounts, 20 to 30 seems to be a good number. But if you want real kind of more certainty with your stability, then obviously you want to get closer to Facebook recommendation and more. So that's just one thing. The other thing is, if you are, let's say, struggling to get 10 or 15 purchases a week and you're optimizing for purchase, then that's probably going to be a problem. That can lead to kind of instability in your results. Then you might try and optimize for a purchase pixel event, a pixel event slightly higher up. So here's an example. We were selling furniture, e-commerce furniture. The average order value, I think, was about $400. Now, if you think about a $400 purchase, e-com, it was antiques, there's a big thought process behind this. So if we went top of funnel and we optimized for purchase, chances are we just get 0 purchases every day. And we did, we started off with 0 purchases. Then we started to optimize for initiate checkout, and we were getting a few more. Then we started to optimize for add to cart. Now all of a sudden we were getting 50, 60, 80 conversions a week, and we were getting stability all the way through. We were getting kind of a really good stable cost per add to cart. And then we figured, right, let's see how well we can convert these people that are added to cart. And we did. So we were targeting people that added to cart with the purchase event, and we were getting 20, 30, 40 purchases per ad set per week. So bottom of the funnel was really stable. Top of the funnel was really stable. Now, some people will say, if you're targeting people that are just adding to cart, then it's going to be poor quality users. Potentially, and likely, yes. But when you're dealing with a high cost e-commerce ticket, first of all, people are not going to be in buying mode straight away. And secondly, Facebook aren't so good at predicting, is this person going to buy this $400 product? Where they are really, really good is predicting one-step funnels. So click on lander, sign up. Click on lander, download app. those kind of funnels, Facebook are so good at predicting. But when it comes to e-commerce, and this is the thing, like e-commerce is a complex beast because Facebook can't predict what's going to happen, especially for the higher ticket values. If it's $20, $30, $40, it's kind of impulse, and Facebook is pretty good at predicting and giving stability. But the higher the ticket value, the higher the consideration phase, the more complex the funnel, then Facebook can't predict, even though it knows this purchase, this user is a purchaser, it falls into the purchase path, it's your ideal prospect, it falls into your audiences, they reacted well to your ad. Are they really going to buy? They could end up viewing the product and then coming back later. They might view the product and add to cart, and then they'll come back later, and then they see your dynamic product ad, and they want to see that product again. They view the product, the item's already in the cart, they're going to check out and buy. Facebook are not so good at kind of building that into their predictive models, at least from my testing. Facebook might tell you otherwise, but that's the thing. So, what you optimize top of the funnel depends on what the average order value is, how obvious a product is it, how much explaining does it need, how many touch points will it need. For example, if I'm selling, let's say, a necklace and it's got my initials on it or whoever's initials on it, and it's $25, I don't really need to explain much. I show an image, it's a necklace, it's gold plated, it's got my initials. I might have a video that's running top of the funnel, probably optimized for purchase because I want people that are likely to purchase. It's $25, doesn't really need much consideration. If someone's going to buy it, they'll probably buy it on their first day, if not the first visit. And therefore, Facebook are pretty good at predicting, and they'll be able to give you lots of conversions and you get stability, etc. Now, taking the example of antique furniture, $400, finding people who are actually in market right there and then and likely to buy $400 antique furniture is not as easy as a $25 necklace. So that's a longer answer to your question, hopefully. Kenny, for smaller accounts, I find it's difficult to get 50 purchases a week. Any best practices to navigate when budget is limited? I think I just answered that. And actually avoiding clicky users. So one of the things about clicky users is a lot of them hang out in page post engagement campaigns. Hang out is probably the wrong word, but when you're running a page post engagement campaign, Facebook is really good at finding people who like to just hit likes, comments. I've seen so many instances where I run a PPE just because I want to bulk up the social proof, and I get those really, really annoying people that leave the comments with like little heart gifs and little, funny gifs and all that kind of stuff, and they just flood the page. It's so annoying. They're the people that Facebook know are page post engagers. So if you want a PPE and you're trying to get social proof, Facebook knows who these clicky people are. And I've seen it when you optimize for landing page views, when you optimize for view content, when you optimize for link click, Facebook will give you a really high click-through rate because these are clicky users. But when you start going into add to cart, initiate checkout, payment info, purchase, then Facebook is getting serious with you now. So they're more likely to find people that will click. There are many occasions where I've seen e-commerce accounts optimizing for add to cart, and that's all they get is people that are likely to add to cart. And Facebook is good at predicting that. You told Facebook you want window shoppers, it will send you window shoppers. So it's not to say that add to cart is your solution to everything. That's why we run calibration testing. That's why also when we hit the prospecting stage, we will often do a split test. We'll take the best audience, we'll take our best ads, run a Facebook split test, and all we're doing is splitting the objective. So we will test purchase versus payment info versus initiate checkout versus add to cart, and see which of those with fairly decent spend, $250 per ad set over a few days, is going to give us the best performance. And that becomes our scaling optimization. More often than not is purchase, but for some funnels, it doesn't always work that way as well. So, on smaller accounts, if let's say you're limited by budget, then I would be looking to play with my pixels, and maybe, you might end up optimizing for payment info or initiate checkout just because you're able to get enough conversions through and get stability. But then you'll see that your retargeting, which is optimized for purchase, is picking up all your sales bottom of the funnel because it now knows who's in market from that. So, like the CBO strategies, it doesn't have to be that you have to always run big campaign spends. But if you want stability and you want fast growth, you need to fill that bucket up with data. So if you let's say you can't, or you don't want to spend 3 times your CPA per ad set for your CBO budgets. Let's say your CPA target is $50, you've got 5 ad sets running. Then you might set a $250 budget for your CBO, but be prepared to wait longer for significant results and be prepared for those results to bounce around the different ad sets. That's the thing. So that's why we also use minimum and maximum to kind of control FA spending as well. So hopefully that helps you on that. Kenny, again, for one-day optimization, ad set level, what you click, one day view, 7 day is test to see what works for you. That's why in the guide, I've been quite clear to say, one day click was the turning point for us to make CBO work, and we have consistently made it work since. And we do now and again test 7 just to make sure, you know, things are still working. You should always test strategies. That's something which we always try to do because Facebook changes so often. But one day has continually worked for us, regardless of the average order value, the niche, the products, e-com, info products, etc. We're running, you know, I'm running ads on my own ad account for this cookbook, for my courses, my programs, etc. Still using one day click on lead gen for optimizing for registrations. The same on our e-com stores. We're doing one day click for high ticket and low ticket as well. So for us, it just continues to work. Test it out. Try one day click versus one day click, one day view versus 7 day and see what works for you. Marco, if the prospecting campaign is consistent, what can we do? Thank you very much. Congratulations. Thank you, Marco. So if the prospecting campaign is inconsistent, what can we do? So inconsistency, why does that happen? Generally, not enough data, but it could also be that your audience size is too small, maybe your budget's too high, maybe your ad that you're kind of serving people, you've got too many ads running and kind of the auctions bouncing around in different places. If you're getting kind of results that are bouncing around, the first thing you can do is duplicate that campaign and start again, because it could be the case that Facebook has just given you poor data at the campaign level for your ad sets and your ads, and you'll continue to play in bad data. So there might be an occasion where if you're convinced that Facebook is just messing with you and you've had some good results previously, you can duplicate the campaign. But if I've got a campaign with inconsistent ads, then I'll try and reduce the number of ads I'm running to maybe 2 per ad set. If I've got too many ad sets running, I might try and lock that down to reduce the number of ad sets, because stability often comes from not getting enough data, enough conversions, and the budget being off in terms of what the CBO needs based on number of ad sets and ads as well. So there are just a few things that I would look at as well. Again, as I said earlier, have a look at delivery insights, have a look at audience saturation. Maybe you're being bullied in the auction. Have a look at your competitor bidding insights as well to see what the auction competition looks like and whether you're actually being bullied out of the auction. Because sometimes you'll see that on given days, competition is really high and then it goes really low, really high. That often matches with your CPA and ROAS. And it could literally be like, I've had this in the past where we've tried to do all these optimizations. We've looked at the auction competition, and we've seen that there are fluctuations in the level of competition, which simply means either there's too many people coming in, and therefore the audience has become competitive, or one or more people are bidding higher on your particular audience, and they're bullying you out. So we can thank Tim Bird for that. But you know, that does happen as well, that you will get bullied out. How do you counter that? You can go into manual bid and push even harder. If you're really confident you've got a great audience and a great ad, then you can go into manual bid and push harder and push back as well. Monique, hello. Is it okay to reduce complexity and have one CBO for audience and ads testing? What's the reason for grouping CBOs into lookalikes, broad, and interests? Maybe I need to explain that better in the guide. I thought I did explain that. Maybe I'll pull that out into a separate section. So the reason I do this is because the quality of the audiences are very different. So a lookalike is based on either website data or data that's outside of Facebook, so custom audiences or kind of video views or anything like that. That quality of data is generally good because you can control what goes in, and assuming you've controlled it well, So, you know, I want to put purchases in there, or I want to put people who have viewed 95% of my video, or fans of my page, or whatever your lookalike seed audience is. The quality of that is very different to interests. Unless you're kind of, you know, even if you're doing laser targeted interests or you're doing broad, there's going to be a big difference with lookalike quality. And then you've got completely broad audiences, where broad for me is, at the best, you maybe put a gender or an age in, but you don't do any interest, any lookalikes, any behaviors. The thing is, the quality of the audiences, those three are very different. Often the sizes of the audiences are also very different. And what I found from testing is, you know, we've run CBOs, we've put all of these audiences into one CBO. We've tried it where they're split out. And for us, consistently splitting those CBOs out has worked. So therefore, that's what we use. So again, as I've said before, if you group them together and it works, then that's absolutely great. All I can share with you is what works for us and what has consistently worked for 12 months with millions of dollars of testing. It does not mean it will work for every single person that's advertising on Facebook. So you can test it out. But, you know, if you, and this is what the guide is about. If you want to fast track and you just want to skip some of the learnings, then you can go with what I've said. You can use it. If it works, then great. Don't look back. Or you can question it, and there's nothing wrong with questioning what's in there and saying, okay, I understand that you're splitting these campaigns out. I want to test it for myself. Absolutely do that. If it works, great. If it doesn't, then you know what the plan B is as well. Isaac, proven lookalikes from the US with a proven ad can be used in the UK, for instance, without repeating the testing process. My short answer to that is no. What I found is there are generally lots of regional variations. My first encounter of this was when I went from running ads in the UK to running ads in Europe, and we went into France, Germany, and Spain. We actually found that the ads that worked in the UK worked well in Germany. They needed some tweaks in Spain, but France was completely different. Now, if we'd gone into all of those countries and said, these ads work here, let's translate and just move them across, we would have failed. But we tested in each of these markets. We took our kind of English base and then we kind of tested, tweaked, see what would work for France, Germany, Spain, etc. And then we found, you know, in our case, France was completely different. They just did not react the same to the audiences. So there are some massive cultural divides. So I wouldn't personally take my best audiences and creatives from the US and just assume it's going to work in the UK. We do the same process. We run graduation testing in the UK or any other market in the same way. So although we're at a more advanced position to say this audience is good, this ad is good, we still test it and see if it still works as well. Tanvir, when in phase 2 of testing, to test new creatives with working audiences, do you duplicate the same audience 5 times and the same ad 3 times in every CBO? Not every time. So there are occasions where we've got so many creatives that we want to test, then we'll take our winning audience. We don't duplicate the audience anymore because the audience is good. And then we'll run 3 very different creatives, but we want to pin something, or we want to test similar ads. So I'll give you an example. We just launched a batch of ads recently. I wrote the copy for the ads. It was one of our own accounts. And we just used different creatives. So with the goal of this one is to see if the copy works. If the copy works with all 3 images, then we know that the copy is really good. Sometimes one image works better, so we know that that image and copy variant works. If all 3 versions didn't work, then we'll probably go back to the copy and say, well, we've tried 3 different images and that copy didn't work. We might, in some cases, duplicate each of those 3 ads twice. So we've got ad 1, ad 2, ad 3, and we've duplicated it. And we've got multiple variants, multiple variations running. So you've got 3 ads running, but you've got duplicates as well. And what we're doing is spreading the risk, because it might be that your ad isn't working, or it could be that Facebook just happened to serve your ad to a bad audience, because that does also happen as well. So we don't duplicate every time. We kind of see what kind of creatives are coming through. Best practice is that we should duplicate. That's what we put in our training. That's what we train our media buyers on. We don't always follow the same process. And so you can veer in between that. Sometimes we find that we run new ads, we test it, it has great performance. We then move into prospecting and it works. Other times we're convinced it's a good ad, it doesn't perform. we'll duplicate it a few times, run it again, and it does perform. And then we're like, okay, we hit a bad pocket of traffic there as well. Marco, which event to optimize for with website conversions in the testing phase if you want purchases, but the CPA is too high to hit 50 per ad set in a week? So in the testing phase, that 50 per ad set a week is not a consideration because we're not looking for stability. When I'm in testing phase, I'm just looking for significant results. Significant results in the sense that, has my ad had enough impressions? Has it been served to enough people for me to have trust and confidence in the results? And then I pull them out of testing as quickly as I can, usually around 2,000 impressions, give or take. And then I test it in my prospecting and my scaling. So at that stage, I'm not worried about the 50 conversions a week because I'm not after stable performance and I'm not after profitability. I'm not after scaling. I just want to know, does this ad work for this ad set? So 50 per ad set per week is not a consideration for that. Freeman, once you've started CBO campaign, would you turn it off? There is no purchase on day one. If you're getting CPC of less than 1.5, CCR greater than 2, good ratio rate to see content view. No, because it depends what I'm optimizing for. So if my CBO, I don't know if you talk about testing or prospecting, depends off if I'm optimizing for purchase and let's say day one, there's no purchases. Again, I'm looking at what my average order value is and how much I'm actually spending. So if my, sorry, not the AOV, I'm looking at my CPA. So if my cost per acquisition is about $30, I know that that's good for me and that's what my target is. And I've spent 3 times my CPA and it doesn't look like I'm getting good metrics at all. Cost per add to cart, cost per initiate checkout, no sales. Then I'm more likely to pause it. Personally, I'd still give it a bit more time to 5x the CPA target. So I might spend up to $150 before making that call. But in your case, if you're getting what you'd consider a good CPC, a good click-through rate, and good ratio of people clicking into your cart, then that suggests that the ad is good. And also the product page and the match between what your prospects are seeing and what the proposition was, so i.e. the congruency, then that's a good signal. Now, if there's people getting to your add to cart and they're not purchasing, and you've seen this after days and days and days, then you have to ask yourself this: is it the audience that's bad? Is it my landing page that's bad? Is it my product that's bad? Is it my shipping information that's bad? Is it my refunds, whatever it is? There's so many things that could stop people from buying. It's not simply a case of, people are adding to cart, not buying, so Facebook is sending me bad traffic. It could be something you're responsible for as well. So in that instance, I would start doing some testing around finding out why people are adding to cart, not buying. You can ask them. So I like to ask a question using a survey tool like Hotjar, like Lucky Orange. When they land on my product page, is there anything stopping you from buying today? It's a simple question. If they say no, great. If they say yes, there is something stopping them from buying, I ask them to fill out a response. Some people will say, oh, it's too expensive, or my paycheck's due next week, or whatever it is. But some people will say, I couldn't find shipping information. Is shipping free? What's the returns process? Or, are you a legitimate company? I can't see any reviews. Then you can start to figure out, right, that's missing from my top of funnel. Do I start to serve that in my top of funnel? Or maybe in my retargeting ads, I start to introduce that. Hey, free shipping offer. Or did you know that you can return it 30 days, no problem at all? That kind of thing. So you can start testing those messages out and trying to bring people into your funnel as well. Samuel, grad testing phase 1. Test audiences before then ads. So one ad duplicate 3 times for one ad set. If that particular ad won't work for some winner audiences, I'm not sure about that last. Oh, okay. Can we test directly three different ads? So one ad duplicate 3x for one ad set. If that ad doesn't work for the ad set, then yeah, absolutely, test different ads out. So, the whole point of graduation testing, and the analogy I share with people is when you go into a pizza restaurant, if you've been to the pizza restaurant for the first time, you've never tried any of the pizzas out, how do you know that you're going to like this pizza or not? You don't have to eat the whole pizza. You take one bite, you taste it, you either spit it out or you swallow it and you take more in. That's the way I see my graduation testing. So I'm dropping these ads in. If the fish bite, then I know that the ad worked. The audience took a bite out of it. If I drop these ads in, they're duplicated, I've got enough impressions, then I could probably say, especially if I know this audience works, then I can say the ad didn't perform. If I don't know about this audience, so I'm testing a new audience and new ads, then it's a bit of a longer process to find the winning ad and audience match. And for that reason, I'm always testing the same ads in every single audience. If I don't see a match at all, then I go back to the drawing board. Generally, that doesn't happen because I use the 5W avatar. I really understand who my ideal prospect is. My ad sets are aimed at my ideal prospect, the different angles in my copy. I pick out the biggest angles, and then I duplicate those 3 ads in those multiple ad sets to try and find my winning combination. So generally, I will find at least one ad set and one ad match that works, and then I move that to prospecting. Then I take that winning ad set, and then I test more ads with that, and then more ads and more ads, and I'm trying to churn out those winners. And it might be that I test, for every 6 or 7 ads, I might get 1 or 2 that work. But I'm happy with that, and I'm constantly doing that testing, whether I need them or not. If I don't, then they're always ready for when my creative fatigue kicks in. If I need them, then I can drop them in, and we can kind of move on. Kenny, what are the benefits of stacking a CBO campaign versus relaunching through a dupe method? Would love some more context on stacking. So this is related to, I had this conversation with a media buyer in my team, actually, I think last week. So we found a few different audiences, lookalikes that worked. There's like a 1%, a 3%, and a few others as well. And the question was, when we go to prospecting, can we test those as separate lookalikes, or should we combine them together? I prefer to combine them together, because if I've proven that these ad sets work, a super lookalike will give me the best audience within that subset. So let's say I've got a 1% lookalike of purchasers, I've got a 3% lookalike of people with a lifetime value of over £100. I've got a 2% lookalike of people that visited the site 3 times, and that seems to be a winner. Then I would put that into a single ad set, because what happens is, if you imagine a Venn diagram, so you've got all these circles and there's kind of crossovers between different parts of the circle, I'm getting the best, I'm getting the cream of the crop of all those crossovers, and therefore that kind of super stacked or super lookalike will give me bigger sustainable audiences, because now I've got 1%, 2%, and 3% in there. Even though they're different kind of quality signals, if I've proven they work through testing, then I'd combine them together, so I've got more sustainability in my scaling. Now, if I had to run those as separate ad sets, then you have to think about overlap, then you have to think about audience size, et cetera, et cetera. What I found, especially over the last probably 18 months, is fewer audiences and fewer ad sets give me better stability and better predictability. It's actually something that Facebook recently came up with the Power 5, where they're trying to get people to trim down the number of campaigns. Obviously, they want everyone to run CBO as well, but we're seeing the same. We've had accounts where we've had multiple ad sets running on multiple small volume budgets and stuff like that. I've seen some people still make it work, but the majority are failing to make that work because Facebook need data, they need stability. And if you're happy to play what I call the casino game with Facebook, and you fire up 300 ad sets and you're spending $10 per ad set a day, and you want to find kind of one sale here and there, you're going to be caught in this roulette wheel. Every day is going to be a gamble for you. And some people are happy playing that game. I prefer not to. For my clients and for myself, we prefer predictability and stability, and therefore we follow this process as well. Kirill, why do you create 2, 3, 4% lookalike audience and exclude 1, 2, 3 instead of creating 1 to 2, 2 to 3%, etc.? There's no real reason for that. You can kind of use whichever method you want. So the advantage of creating like a 3% excluding 2% is you have fewer audiences to bolt on together. So for example, let's say the 1 to 2% and 2 to 3% both work. In my case, I would take the kind of the bigger audience that I've created, the 3%, and just minus the 1%. But either way, you know, ultimately it's the same thing, just cut differently. So I'm probably a lot more old schooler than a lot of you out there as well. How do you identify the most efficient pixel event or objective for CBO testing, prospecting, and scaling? So Monique, account calibration is what I focus on for testing. So I explained that earlier in the video. For prospecting and scaling, so one thing I want to explain about prospecting and scaling, they're just phases. I don't have necessarily a separate prospecting CBO campaign and a separate scaling CBO campaign. My prospecting CBO is in prospecting phase when we're looking for stability and profitability. Then we go into scaling phase where we're looking to now increase the budgets and maintain that profitability and scalability. And again, I explained the process for finding the winning pixel. We use Facebook split test at this stage. We take our best ad audience, we take our best ad, and we split test the different purchase, initiate checkout, add to cart, etc. Pixel events, throw $300 in a week's budget per ad set and see what kind of performance comes back. And that will give us a real strong indicator of which one's giving us the fastest results and the best results as well. Casper, 1 second. By the way, branded drink bottle. I don't know what you guys think, but I was quite impressed with that. Can you please go ahead? Can you please go explain how you test different creatives in grad testing, phase 2? After testing different videos, how do you proceed to test thumbnails? I guess you just take your winning video and just test different thumbnails. I mean, there's no more science behind it than that. But what I would say is, when you're testing your ads out, try and fix as many of those variables as you can. So if all you want to test is your thumbnails, then you could actually run it as a split test in Facebook. If there's just one variable and you absolutely want to know which specific thumbnail is performing best, the thing is, when you're running graduation testing without split testing, there is a chance that people will still see multiple thumbnails, and so your results may not be good. Because here's the thing, when you run a normal ad set and you've got 3 ads running, those 3 ads have the same copy, same call to action, same video, but a different thumbnail. There's nothing stopping one user from seeing 2 ads. They may have seen the first ad with thumbnail 1 and then seen the second ad with thumbnail 2 and then clicked and bought. The journey was actually they saw ad 1 and then clicked on ad 2. However, if you want to properly test that, then you run a Facebook split test. You put your audience in there, you put your 3 ads, exactly the same except different thumbnails. Now you make sure that if one person sees one ad, they don't see any of the other ads. So that way you can specifically say, this ad worked because that's the only ad that person saw. So just bear that in mind. So if you want to properly know which specific variable is working, you have to use the Facebook split tool. But when I'm doing my kind of broader angle testing, I don't necessarily need that. But if I wanted to go more scientific and I really, really want to know, like, I'll give you an example. Sometimes all we change in the ad is the first 2 lines. So whether it's long form, short form, video, whatever it is, sometimes that's all we're changing. And we want to be a bit more scientific about it. Then we run a split test. So split test 1 is, headline variation 1. Then the next one is variation 2, variation 3. And then we get a proper result, because we know that because the split test will split users into different parts, users that saw ad 1 will only ever see ad 1. So if they reacted and bought, then we know that ad 1 works as well. Monique, how do you group lookalike audiences in testing and scaling? Do you group them by quality? So put all 1% lookalikes together, TR, traffic, add to cart, purchase, or by type, e.g. ATC 1 to 4%. That's a good question. So when I'm doing my testing, I will group based on the audience size. So 1 to 3% in one CBO, 4 to 7%, and then kind of 8 to 10%. When it comes to scaling, then I group them again based on that percentage. But at this stage, I don't really worry about what's going together, because if my graduation testing says a 1% add to cart and a 3% purchase and a 2% initiate checkout on my best audiences, then I prefer to stack those together, unless I see that different ads work for those different audiences. Then I'm less likely to stack them together. More often than not, I find that the same ads work in these different audiences, and therefore it doesn't matter. I want as few ad sets as possible, so I can give myself the best chance of success, biggest audiences as well. But like I said, if it is the case that the audiences react to different ads, then you would have to keep them separate. Otherwise, that performance would not continue as well. Kirill, if by phase 2 I have 4 to 5 well-performing ads in one ad set, when I move it to phase 2, CBO, do I still need to duplicate the ads and add new ads to it? So if by phase 2 I have 4 to 5 well-performing ads in one ad set, when I move it to phase 2, duplicate the ads and add new ads to it. I'm not exactly sure what that means. So if you've got 4 to 5 well-performing ads in one ad set and you go to phase 2, the phase 1 testing goes straight to prospecting at that stage. So I would take the post IDs if possible, because not every ad type allows you to take the post ID. So where possible, I'll take the post ID and move that into prospecting. Then at that stage, I'm now seeing if I can get stable results, higher budgets, and see if I can get good performance. Then I move to scaling. Then in the background, phase 2 of my testing kicks in, where I take the best audience, and now I'm testing new ads. And so that's the kind of process that I would follow for that. Hey Scarlett, why are there 2 phases for GT? Why can't we iterate ads in phase 1 itself once we've found winning audiences? Hopefully I've answered that, but in short, phases are based on the processes we go through. So phase 1 is find winning audiences. Phase 2 is to find ads. Whether you use the same campaign, same ad sets, that's entirely up to you. Freeman, do we need to switch off bad ad sets daily and reopen it the next days for optimization of CPO? Or we let it open even though some CPO ad sets have high CPP? This depends on your acceptance to invest money in your testing or not. So my preference is always to pause at the ad level, let the ad sets continue. Unless I really feel like this ad set is performing bad, then I would pause out the ad set. But it's my kind of option C. So option A is ads, option B is to make a bit of a loss, and option C is then I might consider pausing the ad set. But that for me has a bigger negative impact than just pausing the ads. And that causes more of a change, I think, in performance at the CBO level. Ali, what actions do you take on a week like this when Facebook performance is tanking, reduce budgets, turn off ads or ad sets, duplicate and restart, etc.? I kind of covered this off before. So it depends on whether I'm chasing the sale or not. So if I'm in let's say, for example, we're in Black Friday and Facebook's gone a bit funny and, Facebook's, a lot of people have said, CPMs have rocketed or conversions have dropped and so Facebook have got technical problems, etc. Yet we're in the kind of middle of Black Friday and we want sales and we want to scale up. In that case, I would be duplicating, I would be trying different angles, trying different budgets and just putting as much into it to try and recover. If like today, where I'm not in a mad push to generate sales, then I'm more likely to start pausing at the ad level. And then if I feel it's still consistently bad, using my judgment, and this is the thing, like machine learning and all these tools that say, we're clever, we can adapt, we can do manual bid, all that kind of stuff. They lack human context because they can't see what's happening around outside of the computer system. So if I know that all of our ad accounts are having a problem today, people in forums are saying there's a problem, we've had some errors from Facebook, we'll just turn off the ad sets and then we'll come back tomorrow and we'll restart it again. So it really depends on how desperate you are to generate sales and how much risk you want to kind of carry and take forward as well. Altiv Group, what's the best audience size and budget and number of ad sets at scaling phase for CBO? So best audience size is as big as you can get it. Generally, there's a payoff between the amount you spend per day and the audience size. So I know some people have kind of modeled and said, if your audience size is that, then your budget is that. I don't think there's a fixed number. I think generally, to kind of keep it simple, if you've got an audience size of 1 million, then as a factor of 10, the most you can probably do a day in spend is 1,000. If you've got 10 million, you could probably comfortably do 10,000 a day. If you've got 50 million, you could do 5,000 a day. They're kind of rough benchmarks, but it doesn't mean that's the optimum. There's other factors that play into this. So even if you've got a 20 million audience, it might not be as well carved out as a 2 million audience. And that makes a difference in your ability to spend and scale. I'll give you an example. So last Q4, we had I think a 5% lookalike in a country where 5% was only I think it was about 2.5 million people. So that's like a 1% lookalike for the US. But this was a 5% lookalike. We were spending, I think, up to about $5,000 a day. And we were comfortable. But although the audience wasn't massive, we were iterating our creative quite frequently as well. So maybe once, if not twice a week, we'd be cycling creatives, testing new ideas out. But when we cycle 2-3 weeks later, we might bring back old creatives that used to work as well, because the audiences often refresh as well. So audience size is one thing, and kind of managing the budget is as much about the quality of the audience as it is the size. Number of ad sets at the scaling phase for CBO. Generally, I don't go above 7. It really depends on what budget I've got. For me, 5 is just a comfortable number that seemed to work. Again, you can test this out. If you have more and more ad sets, then you need a bigger budget. But again, it depends on the quality. So I've had the occasion where we've had, I think we're running this right now actually for one of my own accounts. We've got 6 or maybe 7 warm audiences. So people that have engaged but not clicked, video viewers, fans of pages, and a few other bits in between that. And we're running like $50 a day on 7 audiences, which is not, that's not an ideal budget to ad set ratio, but these are warm prospects that are high quality, and therefore we're generating a good number of conversions a day and a week, and we're getting good performance out of it. For cold, if I run 7 audiences with $50 a day, I get a lot more inconsistencies. For my top and bottom of funnel, again, I get a lot more consistency because I can get conversions more frequently as well. So I don't know how much that helps you. A lot of it is quite broad because there is no specific answer to this, but hopefully that gives you just at least some insight into kind of my thought process as well. Mohammed, can you elaborate on your strategy of duplicating one audience 3 to 5 times in one CBO? It's worked for me at scale, but with inconsistencies, wish to understand it. The point is, when Facebook drops ads into an auction, so for a single ad set, there's no guarantee it's going to get the best users. So what I'm doing is de-risking that by giving it 3 to 5 chances with exactly the same ad in a given ad set and seeing if it can pick me out the best users. So that's as simple as it is. And that's generally why that kind of strategy seems to work. Tanvir, how do you do account calibration properly? I've watched the BPM method, still don't really get it. I go into a lot of detail into the video to explain exactly how that's done. The nutshell is, as I explained earlier, get your best audience, your best ad, and all you're doing is changing the optimized pixel for the duplicates of the ad sets you're running. And then I'm putting a budget against them. If it's CBO, then I set a min budget. And what I want to do is make sure each ad gets 5,000 impressions. And then I'm comparing CPM, CTR, CPC, cost per ad to cart, any other metrics to see where I can get efficiencies. So if, for example, I can get a lower CPM and still get sales with a cost per ad to cart, then I might use that for my testing. So that's kind of what I'm generally trying to do with account calibration. Tanvir, when you find a new creative that works with an audience, do you wait for the existing creative with that audience to die out before launching the new creative? When I find a new creative that works in an audience, I don't just wait for that to die out, I'll be honest. So I'm always trying to leave minimum 2, probably maximum 4, maybe 5 ads running per ad set, depending on the amount of budget, size of audience that's running. But I wouldn't ever get to the stage where there's just one ad and it's crushing it and I'm happy with it. I'm not. If one ad is crushing it, that's a risk. So I'm always looking to bring new ads into the mix as well. Krista, is there anything that you'd do differently or even phases that you'd skip in your strategy when dealing with a small audience, small country or B2B business? Absolutely. If I have a really small budget, then I would probably have fewer ad sets and fewer ads, for example, which I do kind of cover off in the guide. If the budget is really tight or the audience size is tight, I might flex my rules. So where I say 3 times CPA times times how many ad sets there are, I would probably flex that a lot more, with the caveat of knowing that it might take me longer to get results, or I might be looking at more inconsistencies. Or, for example, and there's nothing stopping you doing this, you can run one campaign, CBO, one ad set, and then multiple ads. And that's exactly the same as running an ad set budget. So if I'm dealing with a really small country, I might just have one ad set in one campaign, set the budget at $50, and just let my ads run, and then start scaling it up from there. So you can kind of use the old school way with CBO as well. Hey Peter, move from campaign to campaign. Do campaigns stay alive? If you have 5 to 7 days worth of prospecting stability, do you turn it off and shift to scaling? So I did answer this before. So prospecting and scaling for me is a more of a mindset thing rather than changing your campaigns over. So if I've got 5 to 7 days worth of prospecting stability, and I will go back and edit the guide to make that clear, I would do my scaling on that. Like if you turn that campaign off, then the data's gone. If you duplicate it and start again, you're gonna have to rebuild that data. So scaling you do on your prospecting. Raymond, when is it better to optimize for ATC? Top of funnel, then purchase? I'm still not fully convinced about ATC. I've tested a lot, but all I get is bad traffic and no sales. So hopefully I've answered this earlier on. Add to cart I use for my testing phase if I think that it works better than other pixels, but that I use calibration testing. Then for my prospecting and scaling, I run split tests to see which is my best pixel. So test it and see which gives you the best results. Raymond, when you test your ad sets and creatives at top of funnel, how do you determine the countries you're testing? How do you then branch out to other countries when scaling? So first I want to start in one country. Usually it's US or UK for me. It's just easier, language, etc. When I start to introduce new countries, I generally, if they're tier 1 countries, and I know they're big e-commerce countries, then I'd run them in their own ad sets, and then I would kind of see which audiences and creators work. If they're tier 2 countries, they're smaller or unknown, then I'd probably group them together and then split my results in the breakdown and see kind of what's happening there. Because I want quick results, and I know generally these are not kind of big scaling countries for me as well. Stefan, how do you spot creative fatigue? I answered that at the start of the video, so you can zoom back, or if you're at this stage, you've probably seen it already. Jed, what's the most cost-effective way to test with CBO? Jed, I wrote a whole ebook on this. I don't know what you've missed, but like a big part of the document and the recipes is all about effective ways to test with CBO. So I can only assume you've skipped past some of the ebook, or I don't know. It's all in the CBO. Like I don't want to go back through stuff that's already in the document, so I recommend going through that as well. Monique, do you separate audience and ad testing into separate campaigns still, like in BPM method, or put them all together? Separate campaigns generally, but you can push them together if you want. There's no hard and fast rule with this. Freeman, when to determine need to switch CBO from auto bid to manual bids? And this is a good question. So not that the other ones were not good, I don't mean it by that, but it's an interesting question. So for me, I focus on the core 4. So this is a big part of our methodology, which is the product, the offer, the audience, and funnel. When all 4 of those are dialed in, and you've got a great product that's already been tested with an audience, it's proven, got a great offer, proposition, messaging, your funnel is converting really well, I found you don't actually need manual bid unless you want to accelerate your results. So let's say it's one day, it's Black Friday, you want results fast, and manual bid is great for that. But if you want consistency and you've got all your groundwork done, got a slick funnel, great audience, ads, etc., Facebook will reward you generally with the best users and the cheapest users. Isn't that what manual bid's all about? So on the one side, I don't need manual bid when things are working well. On the other side, if I know that I'm not actually performing well, then I can use manual bid to bypass what Facebook ranks me at, but I'm likely to pay more in terms of CPM as well. So it's a balance between those. So if I'm in CBO and I want to scale a lot more aggressively, then I would go into manual bid. But if I want to be more steady, then I generally wouldn't use manual bid. Isaac, CBO lookalike. I have trained a pixel with 5K sales, most of them in one country. Why does the lookalike give higher cost per purchase than interest or broad? Here's the thing, like lookalikes, at least in the last kind of 6 to 12 months, they're not always, they used to be a case that lookalikes would always give you the best performance compared to interest. Broad for me is working so good. And the reason for that is, and you go back to the core four, if you have an audience and you have really great angles in your ad and your creative, your copy, etc., you can go fairly broad, and people that are interested in the ad will interact. People that are not will just bypass. And for me, that's a good ad. An ad that calls out the right user is a great ad, not one that gets the highest click-through rate, because click-through rate for me counts for less than someone sticking to my site, so high engagement rate, and purchasing. That also means more to Facebook, because for Facebook, it's expensive for you to take someone off of Facebook. They're losing that user, right? Just think about it. Facebook have worked so hard to get people onto their app and onto their website to use the website. You're paying to take them out of Facebook. So what Facebook says is, you better treat them well. You better give them a great experience, because if you don't, we'll punish you. That's it. That's simply it. So for me, broad audiences, bigger audiences generally work better with great ads and great funnels. That's as simple as I can break it down to you. Francisco, how do you introduce new creatives into prospecting campaign, or do you start the process from zero if you run out of backup ads or winning ads? So new creatives, first of all, I don't launch them except for early in the morning. So between 6 o'clock and maybe 10 o'clock in the morning later. So if I've got an existing ad set, it's doing well, I want to use that window only, unless I really, really have to, because that gives the pacing algorithm, and it does cause some disruption to the learning phase, especially if your spends are low and you don't have much history at the ad set level, then that can disrupt things a lot more. If you're spending like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 a day, and you've got good stability, it's been running for some time, it has less of an impact, but that's kind of what I try to do as well. If I start the process from zero, run out of backup ads or winning ads, generally that doesn't happen. So, as long as you're running grad testing in the background, you should always have new ads ready for you. If you do run out of ads and you've just paused the ad set, then you can fire the new ads in, see if you can get good performance. If it continues to perform bad, then duplicate the ad set and try that again. Jeffrey, when graduating either phase 1 or 2, your methods and also graphic chart, suggesting that we test one ad, duplicate 3 times across 6 campaigns. Where's the question? I guess yes. It doesn't have to be duplicates. We do that specifically to try and bypass what Facebook's doing with us in the auction. So it's certainly one of the options we use. When prospecting campaigns are ready to scale, do you duplicate them to scale, or do you apply scaling methods to existing successful prospecting campaigns? No, we don't duplicate. So this is something which I will clear up in the cookbook. When we are in prospecting phase, it's just a phase. Then when prospecting is showing good performance, then we move into the scaling phase. We don't duplicate the campaigns at that point. And maybe that's a misunderstanding in the ebook. We will fix that. Naveen, specific question regarding CBO with lifetime budgets and how it can be used to combat early morning wastage. I don't know if you're happy with me sharing that link, but this will be public. So I'm not going to click it because I really don't know what's there, if it's your ad account or anything like that. But what I will say about lifetime budgets, we're actually testing this again this week. We have an ad account which between midnight and about 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, CBO seems to dump a lot of budget in. Sometimes it does well, sometimes it doesn't. So the theory we're going to play with is what happens if we start the budgets at 10 o'clock in the morning, finish them at, I think performance starts to die at about 10 o'clock in the evening. With lifetime budgets, we can do this in a way that tells Facebook ahead of time what time we plan to start and finish. If you manually do this, Facebook has no idea. So if we start it at 10 in the morning and we finish it at 10 at night, the pacing algorithm says, right, I've got 12 hours to spend this budget, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. So therefore, I'm going to apportion my spend like this. If you start it at 10 and you manually pause it at 10 o'clock, 12 hours later, Facebook is pacing for 12 a.m. So therefore, things can get a bit kind of disruptive. So that's one side of it. And then using lifetime budgets, what I would do is take my daily budget and times it by however many days I want to run it. It can get quite scary. So for example, if you've got a $1,000 a day budget and you run it for 10 days in a campaign optimization with lifetime budgets, your budget would be $10,000 over 10 days. And that's a scary thing if you're going from 1,000 a day. However, make sure you've got rules in place, you're monitoring your campaign performance, etc. Facebook's pretty good at budgeting. Generally, it's more tentative early on, and then it starts to get more speculative, and it might start spending more. But it's one of the most efficient ways of spending a budget. Now, if you want consistent scale, you want to find breakout opportunities of scaling, then it's not for you. If you want consistency, you've got a great audience, great ad, and you just want great consistent results, it's certainly an option to look at as well. Vivek, loving your book. I've never seen or read anyone explaining how exactly Facebook algorithm works. You're one hell of a cook. Thank you. Appreciate that. Sergio, can we use dynamic ads together with CBO? The question's already answered in the cookbook. It is. I hope you finished reading it, and I do recommend it. It does work well. I use dynamic ads, so product ads and content optimization further down the funnel generally, but you can play with it higher up as well. How do you find benchmark metrics for grad testing? So if it's a brand new account, then I have the knowledge already from other accounts, so I kind of know what to look for. If you have no knowledge, it's a brand new ad account, then all you have to do is just start running ads and start to see what metrics come through and start tracking and monitoring to get yourself into the position to benchmark. So that's one thing. The other thing is just ask people in your circles, in forums, etc. Say, I'm running products for this niche. My average order value is this. I'm aiming for a CPA of this. What kind of cost per add to cart should I look at, etc. You'll get information from other people as well. Do you have a recommendation for app install campaigns, says Stefan, especially in gaming? So app installs for me are a lot more predictable to work with CBO than e-commerce because it's just the funnel is shorter. Now, what I found works well in an app install and also lead gen, if you get your core four in place, you've got a great product, audience, offer, and funnel, then things are great. But things like using target cost bidding work really well on app installs. So if you have an app install target cost of, let's say, €1, £1, $1, or whatever it is, and you've already tested audiences, creatives, and all that kind of stuff, generally you can get really good, stable performance at scale as well with app install. When you're optimizing for cost per app install, if you're optimizing for cost per registration, then that might not work so well. So it really depends on what your optimization goal is for that. So last few questions. How do you work best with exclusions on retargeting? Do you avoid overlaps or rather keep the audience sizes larger by not using too many exclusions? With exclusions on retargeting, I try and keep the audiences as clean as possible. So I avoid overlaps with my retargeting. So if the question is cold versus retargeting, then I absolutely exclude each layer. So I exclude cold, warm and hot from cold, hot from warm, and then obviously within ad sets for my hot audiences as well. Isaac, with a product over $50, will you keep one click view better than 7-day views on the CBO campaign? I still use one click. I've explained that previously in the video. It's something for you to test, but 1-day click has just generally worked better for us. Testing phase 2, to rate or discard an ad, the 5,000 impressions you suggest are at the ad set or ad level. It's at the ad level, but it doesn't have to be 5,000 impressions. So generally it's 2,000 to 3,000 is good enough. The more impressions you give it, the more statistical data you'll have. But generally I've found 2,000 to 3,000. It depends on the optimization event and the funnel as well, as to kind of how many impressions you need. But generally 2,000 to 3,000, you can round it to 2,500 is kind of generally good enough. Francisco, do you drop new backup ads inside of it that you verified as new winning creatives on a well-optimized campaign that's been running for a month? New backup ads. Yeah, so I think I understand what you're saying. So if you've got a well-performing ad set and it's been doing well, but you don't need any ads for it, you can drop ads in early in the morning, but switch them off and have them running, have them in the ad set as backups, even if you don't need it for another 2 or 3 days, because just switching on an ad has less of an impact than dropping a new ad into an ad set as well. Jeffrey, when you make judgment calls, are you pausing based on impressions at the ad set or ad level? In terms of judgment calls, I think, so I'm guessing you mean by kind of prospecting and scaling. So yes, I look at how much spend and kind of, I guess spend has gone into it. So for example, if I've spent 3 times my CPA and my results are all over the place, then I'm going to pause it. If I spent 5 times my CPA, probably not got a purchase. If I'm expecting a purchase, then I might pause it as well. So at that level, I'm not looking at impressions. I'm looking at how much I've spent in relation to my CPA. The reason is I'm giving Facebook enough spend to really understand that audience and that. And if it's still not performing, then I might pause it out at the ad level. Last one here from Jeffrey. When prospecting, you create entirely new CBO campaigns for your best group audiences, correct? One for interest, one for lookalike. Yeah, absolutely. So I always keep interest, lookalike, and broad separate. Then within that, I'll have multiple ad sets running to see which one kind of works best there as well. So I'm just going to quickly scan through the other questions that have come through the chat. Let's have a look. So Jeffrey says, for first-time impression ratio, I exclude warm, hot, and existing audiences. Does help alleviate that. So first-time impression ratio will only show you at the ad set level. So it really depends on what your targeting is there. After pausing ad sets, do you adjust budgets accordingly? Sometimes yes. So if for example, multiple ad sets have been paused out and I'm spending, let's say, we've just had this today actually, coincidentally, we've been applying a 30% bump on budgets from an ad set of spending 500. It's now up to, I don't know, 1,500 or 2K. We had bad performance over the last 2 days, and we've reduced budget by 10%. It's the Punisher method, which generally helps to bring performance back. So sometimes we do combine that as well. Naveen says, yes, you can click it. So let's have a look at what Naveen's got. Naveen's a top guy. I've always got time for Naveen. I can't move my Zoom thing out of the way. There we go. Thanks for the extensive book, Deepesh. It's really interesting to review the recipes. Written form, this procedural way of approaching ad buying is very effectively relayed in written format. So that's actually really an interesting point. So some people were like, you know, we're not paying X for a book. And, you know, what I tried to say is, this is something which originally started off as just a few pages as a CBO guide, which then turned into the kind of a mini course in its own right. And at that stage, I was considering turning everything into a video. But actually, in my BPM method training course, a lot of people have said, love the videos, but would love for like written step-by-step instructions, especially because I have a multinational audience. A lot of people are French or they're German or Spanish or whatever it is. And they're like, we find your English hard to follow. Yes, there's some subtitles and transcripts, but we'd love to have a step-by-step instruction and guide. So that's where I decided for the CBO Cookbook to do exactly that. So I'm really glad that some of you have found that useful, because it's not just a book. This is not like a $10 ebook that you can buy, read, have fun, and kind of move on. This is a reference guide. It's a manual. It's something for you to use time and time again. And honestly, if you are not able to make this back in profit, then you've missed something fundamental here, because I've tried to price it in a way that you can maximize your results from this. And I've really gone all in to give you as much as possible. Anyway, back to Naveen's question. Mine was blown on page 16, 17. When I first started Facebook ad buying, used lifetime budgets because I had to watch costs and spends closely. When I took my account over to my agency, they had me switch over to daily. It's easier to scale and deploy, absolutely. When you mentioned that CBO lifetime budgets was going to be a possibility, as you've shared in the group, we are all trying to combat the one last major problem with CBO, blowing through budgets very, very early on in the day. This is happening. This is absolutely painful, because like when you're spending $500 a day with your CBO, generally the pacing works out better. As soon as you step over, for some reason, as you step over $1,500 per day per CBO, then you get this kind of interesting thing where the daily budgets start to spend themselves a lot quicker at the start of their day and also at the end of the day. There's just two sides to look out for. When I ran my lifetime campaigns, I used Facebook built-in day passing tool, and it was very effective. So yeah, I'd recommend doing the same. Early on, I did not have enough data on when my market was in buying mode. Today, I have years of data per time zone. I'm very curious to hear your feedback on this possible strategy that we can deploy. So use your recipes to create lifetime budget CBOs that are set up to run using built-in day parting. Use Reveal for further oversight for individual ad unit performance. And here's the kicker. Using the API, programmatically increase the campaign's lifetime budget and programmatically extend the campaign's end date. Do you think this approach is one that might work to combat CBO early morning wastage? Yes, it can, but the thing about programmatically increasing budgets and the end date of your campaign, it won't necessarily help you spend more. So here's the thing, like if you've got a $10,000 budget, it's a 10-day campaign, Facebook is still trying to get you the best results every single day, and it will manage your budget more effectively, but breaking out and scaling up becomes harder. Now, what you might do is run your lifetime budgets, and that becomes your banker. So you know that you're going to get good performance here. If you see a breakout, then you might create a new CBO, which is a duplicate, same ad set, same ads, but try and find a segment where you can kind of drill into and spend a bit more, but with the caveat that it might negatively impact your main CBO. So it's something to test. I think you need to get the balance right between, do I want consistent results every single day versus do I want to take advantage of opportunities to scale up faster? So that's the kind of trade-off that you're going to have with that as well. Lorenko says, Naveen, we're testing exactly that right now. Programmatically increase the current lifetime budget and the end date. So yeah, you guys connect, absolutely, and see if that kind of works. It'd be great to hear back kind of what your results are. We're doing a lot more lifetime budget testing right now as well. So it's definitely something to test. Let me just see. So Mikhail, interesting. So graduation testing phase 2. How do you go about scheduling new ads after your rules cut off ads at 5,000 impressions? If I publish them at 6 in the morning, sometimes take 24 hours to get them approved, and it messes with our results. That's a big problem. What you can do is, so when it's in review phase, you could get them published, but in paused state, because if you publish them as active, then they will switch on straight away. So you can get them published in pause, make sure they get reviewed and approved, and then turn them on. So that's one option. Dorian, is it possible that hiding comments messes with performance? Hiding I've not found, but deleting certainly does. And also having bad comments has a negative impact as well. Rose, I've started doing a schedule recently with some campaigns. Does it mess up stability when trying to scale? Yes, it's harder to scale with scheduled campaigns. So Jeffrey says, oops, where's it gone? Do you simply refresh with GT ready to go ads in the backlog, or do you duplicate the ad sets? So when I want to add new ads in, I'll use the same existing ad set, unless I believe that the performance of the ad set has dropped, and then I'll duplicate. All that history is kept in the ad set, so I want to maintain that as much as possible. Lorenko, would you recommend indefinitely extending the budget and schedule of a lifetime CBO when it is ending as an effective way of preventing daily budget wasted? Yeah, I mean, that's kind of all you can do, really. It's like you can't, at the moment at least, you can't force Facebook to spend in any given day or have too much control over it. One thing that you can actually use, and this is in the guide as well, and this is from Facebook, changing the min and max budgets at the ad set level does not impact learning or stability or anything like that. So if you see, let's say you've got your lifetime budget and you see a breakout performance, you can try and push up the min spend on an ad set. So if that ad set's already spent $400 and it's doing really well, and some of the ad sets, the other ones are not doing so well, you could set a max lower for the other ones, set the min and max higher for the one that's performing really well, actually see if that would work. So these are the few things that we'll be testing around a lot more as well, and see if that could work for us as well. Swapnil, any tips with regards using CBO for local lead gen? For lead gen, it's CBO works. It's kind of, I don't know if there's anything specific that I can tell you. The thing is, like CBO, you're gonna have no choice anyway, so you should absolutely be testing it. For local lead gen, it depends on your funnel. Like a lot of people will run videos, remarket to them with an offer. Other people go straight in with lead magnet, etc. So it depends on your funnel, but CBO works. It's the whole part of the guide is to make it clear so that you understand exactly what's going on in the background, so you can use and adapt it for your different situation. Like it would be impossible for me to write a guide that works for every industry, for all 7 million advertisers. A lot of it you have to interpret, but I'm hoping that you've got the framework of what we use and how we use it, and you can adapt it for your own needs as well. Hamid, what's your experience with duplicating the exact CBO campaign? So starting 2 exact same CBO campaigns from the get-go. Would you love to know your opinion? Yeah, you can do that. The problem is you need good budgets to be able to do that. So if you've got CBO with multiple ad sets, multiple ads, you need a good budget to test both at the same time and give them enough data to determine if it's going to work or not. So Mikhail, yeah, absolutely. You can do that. Swap nil, awesome. Lorenko, extend the schedule of lifetime CBO every couple of days. Work to effectively replace daily budgets. You can try that. I don't know. That's just something which is a bit of the unknown. Like, I generally have not used lifetime budgets extensively, but we're now testing a lot more with CPO to try and combat some of the insecurities that CBO are showing. So that's pretty much it. So that's it from me.